Today I speak with a mother named Ashley. In this episode we speak in detail about what it means to have a pregnancy-induced condition called pre-eclampsia and how to manage pre-eclampsia, especially as you get closer to the day of your baby's birth. Ashley also shares very honestly the challenges that come after bringing the baby home, including postpartum anxiety and depression, and the intensity of triple feeding, and why this is a time that you really need your village. She reflects how leaning into the moment and embracing the chaos was when she started to really enjoy being with her child. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi Ashley, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Can you tell me you're the mother of who and how old?
I am the mother of an 18-month-old son, Lewis, and he is very boisterous at the moment.
Yes, that sounds like fun.
Yes.
So how did you come into your motherhood? Was it something that you've always wanted?
I think when I would, as a kid, I would if I pictured my future and my family, I'd always pictured having some kids. I am from a family of four, so myself and my brother, and I think I'd always thought that I would have something similar for myself. But I wouldn't say that I'm a particularly a baby person. I haven't been obsessed with babies. I'm still not that obsessed with other people's babies. I'm obsessed with my own, but that's sort of it. And so I think it just sort of got to a stage in my life where I felt like I was ready to make that transition into the next sort of phase, and there's no going back once you've decided that.
Yeah, that's so true. You know what, we're hearing that so much on the podcast. The same response. It's sort of not necessarily knowing if you're going to have children, not being overly maternal, but then falling into it and being pretty happy with the outcome.
Yeah, I think you have to really. What are you going to do? But I've had a lot of joy from becoming a mum in ways that I think I didn't really fathom prior to having a child of my own.
Yeah, that's nice. So how was your pregnancy? Was it all smooth sailing?
Pretty much was. I was very lucky to have fallen pregnant quite quickly, and I didn't really have many side effects of pregnancy until the end. I got heartburn, and then it was really in the last trimester, I developed pre-eclampsia and the complications associated with that. But for the rest of the time, it was pretty easy, which I think I was pretty fortunate because I know it can be quite hard.
Okay, so let's sort of explore the pre-eclampsia, because there might be some people that's the first time they've heard that word. So what sort of signs and symptoms did you manifest to require, seeking medical help? So
I had a screen done around the same time as the 12-week scan, and I screened as being high risk for preeclampsia. So I think that involves a blood test, and then they also do, in the ultrasound, they look at the arteries and things in the placenta, and they do some magic and come up with a risk profile. So I was on aspirin because I was considered high risk because my mum had it, and so did my grandma. But towards the end of pregnancy, I started getting really bad swelling in my legs, and I work shift work and I stand up for doing 12-hour shifts, and so I would go to work and my legs wouldn't touch, my pants would be loose, and then by the end I would have my thighs would be touching, my socks would be leaving impressions on my feet, and I started getting headaches and just being really tired.
Yeah, okay. So the screening test that you did, is that because of your mother having preeclampsia, or is that a standard test?
I think it was because my mum had preeclampsia, and I'm not sure, you can opt in or out of it, but I didn't actually know what was happening at the time. I thought it was standard, but I've found out since that it's something that's additional, because my mum had it. So there's a strong family link there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe if I could just expand a little bit on preeclampsia. So it is a serious condition, otherwise known as pregnancy-induced hypertension, and it involves high blood pressure around or after the 20-week mark. Is that when you found out?
You
found out her early risk earlier?
Because I was on high risk, I was on aspirin, which aims to take it daily until 34 weeks, and the aim is to prevent you from getting hypertension, like high blood pressure, from like 20 weeks, so early. And so I was fine, and I didn't have any signs until I got the swelling and things at about 36 weeks, and then my blood pressure spiked all of a sudden after it had been like normal the whole time.
Yeah. So I think that's another thing about preeclampsia. You can have sort of normal blood pressure for a period of time, the whole way through, and then all of a sudden it just kind of hikes up. Yeah.
And I didn't know that either. So I, was like, I'll just wait, until I see my midwife in a couple of days, and like I found out that, you need to do something straight away if that happens.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it's usually done as a blood test around that 20-week mark, where it reveals whether you have protein in the urine, and which is indicative of low platelets, low blood cells. We're not sure of the exact cause, but it tends to be more common in first births, those with a family history or having previous pregnancy preeclampsia. So for you, it was like a genetic thing. Yeah. The symptoms can include, as you said, the sudden swelling of the face, hands, feet, and worsening at night as the day goes on. Can also include jittery muscles, obviously increased blood pressure, headaches across the forehead, blurred or tunnel vision, chest pain. And if preeclampsia is not controlled, it can lead to eclampsia, which is very serious. And this can lead to liver and kidney, damage and shutdown, which is not something you'd want to have. Yeah, okay. All right, so then how was yours managed after you started to realise that you're getting the high blood pressure and some of those other symptoms?
Yeah, so I was I finished work on the Friday, and then I was having my baby shower on the Sunday. And we had the baby shower, and no one told me at the time, but my friends after was like, oh my God, you look terrible. You were so swollen. But one of my friends is an obstetrician, and she actually said to me, she's like, when she was leaving, she's like, you need to take your blood pressure, and if it's like above this, you need to go to hospital. And I was like, but do I really? Like, I'm seeing my midwife, and she's like, you seriously need to go to hospital. So, okay. So I took my blood pressure, and it was really, really high. And I called, because I was managed under group midwifery practice. So I called the on-call midwife and told her my blood pressure reading was, and she's like, okay, come into hospital. And initially it was just meant to be, and so I was 36 weeks that day. And then it was initially just going to be for observation, like to get my blood pressure done and some blood tests. But basically it just sort of snowballed. So every test result that came back was, I had lots of protein in my urine. My platelets were low, my kidney values were off, and so they, it went from, you'll be here for 4 hours for monitoring to you're just going to stay overnight. And then they gave me, I had intravenous, blood pressure lowering medication, and I was sort of being monitored in hospital. And then the next morning they booked me in to have a scan to just see how my son was going. And he was found to be growth restricted, so he dropped off from being on the 30th percentile for his length to the 13th, and so and my blood results kept looking worse, and so they were like, "Oh, you are gonna have to have your baby," and that all sort of happened really suddenly. So I think by Monday that was when they were like, "Oh, I think you're gonna have to have your baby, today or tomorrow." And then I was going to have planning for me to have a cesarean, but then I'd had lunch, so that got put off, and then I was induced that night and ended up having to have him because I didn't know, I think I saw because I had both the obstetricians coming to talk to me as well as the kidney doctors because they were worried about my kidneys. And the kidney doctors, I think I saw them first. I was like, so when do you think I can go home? And she laughed at me and she's like, not till you have your baby. And I was like, oh, okay. That's the only way to fix this sort of cascade of events. And so that was sort of...
So that was when it really hit you.
Yeah. And I think I wasn't really sure. I think also coming in on a Sunday when you haven't got the normal decision-making stuff there and things, and it was, I think because it was evolving, obviously, I didn't really know what was happening or what was going to happen. And my husband was planning to come and pick me up we were going to go home on Monday morning. But he's a pharmacist and works at the hospital. And I think I called him in tears and I was like, I don't think this is going well. And he's like, I think I need to go. Like, I better go. And that sort of, then, we had to have him.
Yeah, so how was the actual labour process?
So I was induced, so I was already a centimetre dilated when they checked me on the Monday night. And so I had the prostaglandin and the cervidil thing put in, and that was for overnight. I started having some contractions in the early hours in the morning by myself, and then I took that out in the morning, and I was transferred down to the labour and delivery ward because I was starting to get some of the muscle spasms and things, and they were a bit worried that I was going to go on to get eclampsia, so I had to have an infusion, another infusion to try and reduce that. So they gave me that, and then they were broke my waters, and they were like, we'll start you on Syntocin if you need it, but I didn't. I was contracting really regularly on my own and dilating, so and I also had to, because I had that infusion, I had to have a urinary catheter in, so I think I had planned for a really active birth, and I was going to be in the pool, have the swimmers there, everything, and then the midwife was like, unfortunately, that's not going to be possible for you, you're going to have to be on the bed because you'll have a couple of infusions going, we need to monitor you. And I was like, okay. And then so as far as inductions go, it got intense really quickly, but I was lucky that I didn't need to have the Syntocin. I think that can be pretty painful.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So, you've brought up some things about how it can potentially affect the baby. So one of the things is that it can cause placental abruption, can't it? So is that something that was happening, or...
I don't know. I think they sort of described it to me as the placenta wasn't functioning normally. I think that's from blood pressure being really high. And so because of that, he had, his growth had tapered off. Because I had a scan at 28 weeks because you have an extra one if you're high risk for preeclampsia, and he was seeming normal at that time. Right. And the placenta function was normal. But obviously there's a big time between 28 and 36 weeks.
It also shows how quickly things can change.
Which I didn't realise. I thought, I've been perfect this whole way through, it's fine, and then it can really change really, really quickly.
Radically. So okay, things have not exactly gone the way you had dreamt of. How were you feeling at this point?
I think I just felt really overwhelmed by the whole thing. I felt very thankful that I come from a healthcare back. I'm a vet, so I understand a lot of the terms, because I think it's incredibly scary to be suddenly in a hospital environment if you've not been there before, and having people tell you a lot of information that's changing all the time, and also wanting your input and getting decisions is really scary. I think I just felt really, it was a massive shock. Because I just kept thinking, I'm going to be coming home. Like I said, we didn't have a bag packed. We hadn't packed a bag yet. We didn't have a car seat in. We had nothing set up at home really. And so it was just really a shock. And I had planned in my month that I was meant to have off before I was meant to have my baby. Had booked in to do parenting classes, and one of them was at the hospital the Wednesday after my son was born. And so I think I was just, it was one of those things. I was kind of overwhelmed, but at the same time, you are the only one that can do the birth part, and you have to focus and do it. And so I was proud of myself for being able to galvanize myself and focus on delivering my son, and he was safely brought into this world. And I think that's the thing I'm most thankful for.
I think it's sort of just the way our brains work when we're mothers, and the way nature has set it up is that we just go into gear and we just say, okay, I get in the zone, I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to see it through. But I think often it's afterwards when we really stop and just kind of think about what's just happened. It can feel shell-shocked. I'm sure you had your moments and days.
Definitely did.
And how was Barb then when he was born?
When he was born, his blood glucose levels were a bit low. So even though he got on and had a feed, like we were lucky we got to have that first hour together. But he was very low birth weight, low birth weight, sorry, not very low. So he was only 2.32 kilos. But his blood glucose was very low, so he had to go to the NICU for just about 4 hours, and they gave him some formula, and then he was able to sort of manage things himself. And we were able to go back onto the ward. But it was just really hard because he was early and small, needing to feed him really frequently. But he was so tired, and you had to wake him up. Like, it wasn't like I think I had imagined, they cry, you feed them, they let you know when they're hungry again, and you feed them again. I was on a schedule of like waking him every 3 hours, and I had to offer like the breast, but not longer than 10 minutes because he'd get too tired, and then I was expressing and then giving a bottle as well, and that was so about 8 times in a day. And he just wasn't into being fed really, just screamed all the time, and it was really difficult.
Yeah, it's quite stressful.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you were getting the right support or the right information?
I think it was kind of difficult all of the midwives that we saw were pretty realistic about, like, you're going to be doing this for at least 6 weeks, and it's going to be hard for 6 weeks, but then he'll get bigger and it will get easier. And we saw, it was hard because you sort of see every midwife, and we saw a few lactation consultants in the hospital, they all had different ways of approaching feeding. And so sometimes it'd be a bit overwhelming because I'd be feeding him the way someone had told me to, and then a new person will come in and be like, oh, why are you doing it like that? And you're like, oh, I just want so badly to be doing the right thing, and this is really hard. So, and we ended up like trying a nipple shield as well because he was like had such a small mouth. We sort of went home from the hospital with like a feeding plan, but not, because we were there for 7 days. We're like for both him and me. But that was really difficult, and it continued to be difficult like in the weeks after we went home as well.
Yeah, that's tough. It's often like a more challenging part of it, the journey than the birth. Yeah,
definitely. And that's what I would say now. I think the birth is nothing like compared to those sort of 6 to 12 weeks when after you come home. They're the hardest, I think.
How did you progress with your feeding? What was the setup?
We kept, so sort of for about 6 weeks, my husband had taken 6 weeks off work, so we were able to sort of manage that together. But it's just really exhausting. Anyone who's triple fed will know, like, I honestly feel like you get to the end of feeding him and then it would be almost like, half an hour and then we've got to start again, which is a bit stressful, and like washing pump parts and all that stuff on top of feeding. So I feel like we didn't get to rest very much. But it sort of got to 6 weeks, and then he was still, like, was gaining weight appropriately, but he was really, really fussy on being fed both from a bottle or at the breast, and he would just scream, and he'd be on and off for like an hour trying to feed him, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. And we got to like 6 weeks, and I just remember thinking, like, this is still really, really hard, and everyone said it was going to be so much easier by then. It's really hard. I don't have a groove. Like, what is happening? And so we ended up seeing had a lactation consultant come to the house, and she was lovely. And then we also went and saw a pediatric feeding speech pathologist who ended up being probably the most helpful, because she had identified that his like reflexes were a bit uncoordinated. So like he would turn towards the breast but wouldn't open his mouth, and I was like, I feel like something's wrong because he's not doing all the YouTube videos and what people keep saying. And so just gave us some exercises to do. But I think at that point, I just mentally couldn't cope with being screamed at for an hour, like trying to feed him and then frantically trying to organise a bottle. And so then went on to exclusively pump for 7 months.
Yeah, that's a big ask too. Yeah.
I don't know how I did it now when I look back at it, but I'm glad I did. But
a dedication of a mum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say how grueling that triple feeding can be, and I think that no one can really comment on or judge or criticise unless they've been through it.
100%. It's just like, I guess you just doesn't, I don't know, when you sit about it and think about it, like, oh, it's not that bad, but like when you get such a short amount of time to like rest, and you're spending it like trying to get ready
when
for
you're
the
living
next
it.
Yeah. And it's like over and over, and you're like living on a clock. It's really hard.
Yeah, definitely. And each family needs to weigh up, what's right for them. Is this working? Is this good on my mental health? Is this having an impact on our relationship? There's so many factors in making decisions about feeding. Yeah. So thanks for talking about your experience in its entirety. Yeah. So what would you say maybe to parents that are getting so much conflicting advice, because it's something I hear all the time? And, as new parents, you really haven't done this before, so you don't know. And it's hard to use your intuition because it hasn't been a practice thing.
Yeah, you're like, where is it? Didn't show up when the baby showed up.
I don't think I was born with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how would you, what words of advice would you give to tackle that?
I think now I think for anyone when they're going into their early parenting is just to try and protect yourself. Like, you need to build up your confidence. So if there are people, whether they're health professionals or family members, who are giving you advice that's conflicting with your own personal values or is making you feel crap or like you're not doing a good job or you're not good enough, then you don't need to see them until you've got your strength and your confidence in yourself. Because now people can say things to me and I'm like, whatever, I know what I'm doing enough. But you're so vulnerable in those early weeks and months while you're just getting your feet. So that's what I would say is, like, if someone really is making you doubt yourself, maybe they're not the right person that's not a healthcare relationship that's serving you, and it might be better to look elsewhere. And I also think Googling stuff is just not that helpful. And in a way, I feel like it undermines your own troubleshooting ability. Like, you can make decisions for your family and you do know what you're doing, and sometimes having too many options can just overwhelm you to the point where you have decision paralysis and you can't make a decision at all. I think for me also it was a mental shift of like, actually I get to decide because it's my child and my family. I decide what's right. No one else decides. And I think that was really a revelation to me when I finally realised that. That I don't have to do what anyone else says or what they think. Obviously within reason, so you're not hurting anyone, but I think that would be my main takeaways.
Yeah, there's so much noise, isn't there? And you've got to just slowly work out which noise you're going to shut out and which you're going to let in.
Yeah.
And it can be noise from not just healthcare professionals. It can be family. It can be relatives. It can be a distant great aunt. Yeah. It can be friends that are well-meaning, but it's sort of imposing their experiences on you. Yeah. But I love that you said that. It felt very what was the word you used about how you felt being able to make those decisions?
I think that's a revelation.
Revelation. I love that. Yeah. So it can, so for some it feels a bit daunting that now we have the sole responsibility of looking after another human being, but it could also be very empowering. Yeah. Yeah.
Once you get your head around it. And that's what I feel like with a lot of, now when I'm in a more, I think more confident headspace, I know anyone who gives you advice about mothering or whatever, they're really saying it from a good place. Usually it's because they know how hard it is and they're just like, oh, I found this nugget of gold and it made my life so much easier. But it's really hard in those early days where you're working out what's what.
Yeah, and it's coming from everywhere, and as you said, it can sometimes just actually make you even more anxious that you can't even make a decision because it's just an overload. Yeah. So having preeclampsia, is that likely that you would have it in another pregnancy? Well,
apparently it's about, you don't always get it. I'm higher risk than, so I was told it'd be about 15% because I'm pregnant again. About 15%, but you don't necessarily, it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it again, but you are a higher risk than like the general population of having it again. So you are monitored a lot more closely. Mm-hmm. And in my case, because I did get kidney injury things from preeclampsia, I have to be monitored closely again, because obviously if I get the same again, that would not be good for my kidneys.
Yeah. So was there any sort of repercussions from having preeclampsia after you had birthed your baby?
I was on blood pressure medication for a few weeks afterwards, and my kidney function was reduced for at least 6 months.
Okay.
And so I had to have regular, like I had to keep seeing the kidney doctors like as an outpatient.
Yeah.
And have more like blood and urine tests. And so for the rest of my life now, I need to check my blood pressure and have blood and urine tests done every year. And that's something actually that the kidney doctor said that for women, it's because it's women medicine, like it's a women's problem, like pre-eclampsia, but it actually increases your lifetime risk of stroke and having high blood pressure and kidney disease. And so she's like, it's really important, particularly in those when you've got young kids, to prioritize yourself and get to the doctor and check your blood pressure and things every year, just so if anything happens, you can catch it early instead of later.
So how many weeks are you pregnant?
I'm
let the cat out of the bag.
9 and a bit now. Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Tired, very tired. The fatigue hits differently the second time around.
Yeah.
And just the frequency of appointments is very different this time around compared to the first time because of the complications I had with birthing my son.
Yeah.
My pregnancy with my son. So that's probably the main things. That's a bit tiring, and like actually having to be like, okay, so we're going here and I need to bring my son, and what time do I go with him, and what, it's
a lot.
Thinking outside, it's not just you, it's like you and your little friend.
That's it. No, it's so true, isn't it? It's no longer one, it's two.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having that hindsight with your first experience, what would you do anything differently this time in your pregnancy?
I think this time I would trying to be monitored more closely, and I'm really hoping that I would be able to get closer to term and have a baby that's maybe a little bit bigger, and so a lot of the difficulties that we had with feeding and things might not be as extreme as I had with my son. And I think also just looking at planning the postpartum period a bit more, to be a bit more prepared, because I wasn't prepared at all, and I think that really played into some of the mental health challenges and things that I had. Yeah.
So what are you putting into place for this one, this postpartum?
I think more food in the fridge. I'm going to pack a bag really early this time. Having the house a bit more set up, and maybe getting a cleaner in or something. Making sure there's a car seat this time, so we didn't have one last time. And I think probably for me, just making some appointments to just check in with my mental health advanced. So even if I decide to change them, at least I have them there, and there's a reminder to just check in, make sure things are okay, and try and be a bit more proactive if things are getting on top of me, I think. And maybe organising to have my mum and my mother-in-law and some friends come around to see me a bit more in those early days, just have some company. Yeah.
It's interesting, the things that you've said. It tends to be a repeat of what other second-time mums will say. It's all of those things. You realise, okay, I had no idea that I would need all these extra things, but I definitely want a different experience this time. Yeah, and even if things didn't go exactly to plan, you've got some things in place that, you've got numbers to call, you've got people to rely on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you were saying that you had to leave the baby shower food on the outdoor table, and just go.
We just went, because we thought we were coming home, so we didn't pack anything up. We had my husband went home to feed the cats, and he said there were just magpies just eating brie on our back patio. And thankfully I had two very beautiful friends that came and cleaned the house and set up the bassinet and things for us, and while we were in the hospital. But yeah, being a bit more prepared, so you're coming home to as a prepared clean slate as you can.
Which is possible, yeah. And then of course you've got your son to think about too. Yeah, okay. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about your experience that you think could be helpful for other parents?
I think probably the thing that shaped my postpartum the most was that I had really bad postnatal anxiety. And I think that is something that's not just talked about enough maybe. And it wasn't until, because I didn't know so many of my friends had had a difficult time until after the fact, because we don't talk about it. I guess we don't talk about it because we don't want to stress out, expectant mums and parents, but there might be someone that listens to this one time that's just thinking, how will I ever get out of this black hole? Will I ever feel better again, and like you will one day.
Yeah.
The fog will lift and you will feel better.
Yeah.
But it is, it's very difficult for some of us.
Were you aware that you had the postnatal anxiety, or were you so consumed with that routine that you didn't even realise?
I think it sort of snuck up on me. I had thought, I'm probably a bit more of an anxious person generally, so I had always thought, I'm probably going to have a bit of a difficult time, like relinquishing control and things, and because that's sort of how I prepare, or how I make myself feel a bit more comfortable, is like reading about things, and I didn't get to do any of that, and then it doesn't matter if you do anyway, because the baby you get may not be the same as the baby in the book, in the textbook. But I think I found like I was getting to a point where I was really, it was probably when my husband went back to work, and I realised I felt a real sense of fear at being left at home alone. Like, will I be able to feed my son? We're still triple feeding. Like, am I going to be able to do this? He doesn't like being breastfed. He doesn't like being bottle fed. Like, what's going to happen? And I would like describe myself as being in hummingbird mode. Like, I was just vibrating with anxiety a lot of the time, and I couldn't like make decisions about anything. Like, I'd try, putting the example of like going to put like laundry on, I'd like walk and I'd see something, and then I'd be like off that and off on something else and off on a tangent, and then I wouldn't be able to work out how to make the washing machine turn on or something. Like, it was really impaired my like decision making skills. And I think that was probably when I was just like, this isn't normal, and I just felt really empty inside as well at points. I just remember calling my friend saying, I've got nothing to give anyone. And she's like, that's not a normal way to feel. And I was like, oh, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. It's sadly not uncommon as well, isn't it? I think we're just expected, because we're women, that we are naturally going to be know everything about how to mother, just by the fact that we're female. But it's not something we're supposed to be doing alone in four walls, without any kind of village around us. So and
that's what I say like to a lot of people now. I'm like, the way that we mother in Western culture is just doesn't work. Like, it's not the way it's meant to be. It's not possible to do it that way without help. And I think that really sets us up for a difficult time, in that we think, oh, we're just going to manage it all. You can't. There's not enough hours in the day to be everything to everyone and to do everything.
Yeah, I think it's time to let go of that badge of honour. It's not, it's not really something that I wish that mothers would feel proud of, that they're doing it all. Yeah. It's true though, isn't it? I don't know whether to say that. I'm not about the badge of honour, but we do, like, we think.
Yeah, I'm managing it all. And that was the half time I would get really upset and be like, I felt bad for my son and for my husband. I'm like, why can't I do it? Like, everyone else can do it, and why can't I do it? What's wrong with me? And I felt bad. I'm like, you should have ended up with someone better than me who could do this. But it's hard. And I think everyone, whether you end up with postnatal anxiety, depression or not, everyone has some wobbles when you start, because it's such a big change. And it's, not everyone loves it all of the time.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the more we have these conversations about it, the more that we can give other women the permission to not be proud of doing it all, because it isn't, no one is really celebrating you. So it's not worth it. And it's impossible anyway. There's no such thing as a perfect mother. We can't do everything at 100%, and we do have to do a lot generally. So something's going to give, and quite often it's the mother's health and well-being.
100%.
How would you say, if you were to differentiate, just for the listeners, the difference between postnatal depression, and would you say you didn't have postnatal depression and you had postnatal anxiety?
I did. A few times when I went to the doctor, and that I think now they routinely do, there's like a score they get you to, a questionnaire they did. I scored more highly for the anxiety, and I think for me it was more like a panicky feeling. And then at times when I was not my best, I would feel a little bit just more sad and lethargic, and just like, I can't do this, and I'm not you can have a better parent than me, you don't need me, that kind of stuff. But I think for me it was overwhelmingly just like a sense of like panic and fear, and this real desire to run. Obviously I didn't run, but just being like, I just don't know what to do. And I think those sort of panicky feelings about being alone or having to do certain things by yourself would probably be where I would say it's more or feeling anxious about things and feeling the need to check stuff all the time. I know some other people who've felt that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, in the earliest days, our brain is becoming very hypervigilant so that we can keep our baby safe and alive. But the less supported we are, the more likely that's going to that's going to be increased and increased to the point where it's becoming, not just checking the baby from time to time, but wanting to check the baby at all times of day, feeling like we can't leave the room, feeling like we can't put them down. Yeah, it becomes a bigger issue, yeah. So what support did you get? Did you go and see somebody? Did you have some counselling?
Yeah, I went and saw my GP and she was amazing and put in referrals for me to see. I went into Tresillian for a week, which I know often probably Tresillian and sleep is what a lot of people would associate them with. But I think for me it was just nice to be, and it was kind of like mothering with training wheels on, in that I had support there, and they really were really wonderful at helping me to have confidence in myself that I could do things, and if I wasn't sure about something there was someone immediately there. I started medication, which I was on for about a bit over 12 months. And I also saw a psychologist as well. And then I had some home nurses that would come to the house to just sit with me and talk with me. And I'm very thankful that my mum is close by, and so she just basically came over in the days and would help me or look after my son while I potted around in my pajamas, pretty much was his reality of what it looked like. And I often say to people, I don't think I needed my mum quite as much ever in my life other than when I was probably a baby and young myself, as I did when I became a mum myself. So I'm very fortunate that I that she's here and that she's close.
Yeah, it's such a strong craving, isn't it? Because in a sense you've been born as well. You've been born as a mother. And so we tend to forget that part. It's not just a baby that's born that day, so there's a craving to feel nurtured and comforted. Well done for seeking help and for also expressing that to all the listeners, that there's no shame in doing that. Definitely. If you're not feeling well or you're struggling, there's so much help available, and it's so much better to reach out earlier than when you reach your breaking point. It's better for you, it's better for your baby, and it's better for your family. For sure. I think sometimes these things can be slowed down, the process, or even sort of reversed if support is there early, because it doesn't take much to help another mother to feel confident. And that's all she needs, is sort of someone to say, hey, you're doing well, you're a good mum, you're doing your best, this is a really hard gig, and we're here to support you too. And we're all feeling the same thing, so you're not alone. It doesn't take much, but the Western world's a little bit slow to catch up. What's something then that you love about being a mum?
I love my son's laugh, and I love playing with him, and I love how watching him grow and learn new skills, and just watching his personality develop, and I think that's so amazing and just brings a lot of happiness, and just makes me laugh a lot too. Even though he's really frustrating at times, because he's got a very can be quite boisterous and cheeky, but I think that's probably the best. And then watching the way that other people react to him as well, because he loves to catch people's eye and smile and wave at other people, and it's the effect a baby or toddler has on other people, and how much joy it also brings other people is really, really heartwarming as well.
It's not a lot can compare to that, does it? And I think maybe when you said you weren't as like one is drawn to newborns. I think all of us feel that way at some point because there's not a lot of interaction.
You don't see them usually.
You don't. You sort of think giving, but I'm not receiving anything that's mutually satisfying. So when they become fun, and also it brings out the playful side in you as well, something that we lose over the years in becoming a responsible adult.
That's very true.
It's true. That's really beautiful. What do you now know that you wish someone had told you before you became a mother?
I think I would say if there's a lot of preconceptions about how things are going to go, and often your baby isn't a textbook baby. I don't know if the textbook baby exists, but just because things are not going the way you thought they would, or your baby's not working with a particular schedule you've read online or what someone else is doing, doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, doesn't mean your baby's broken or that you've broken your baby. It's just that your baby's different and has their own personality and their own needs, and you're best to just tune into your baby and do what's right for both of you in the time. And I also think for me, the leaning into whatever phase you're in and accepting it rather than fighting is when you can truly start enjoying your journey as a mum, and when you can start enjoying your baby and child more. And when you let go of that, it's much more enjoyable, because often things rarely go the way they thought they were going to. And if you're trying to, like, for example, hold on to the spontaneity you had before you were a parent rather than just embracing the chaos that is being a parent, you're going to find it's a much harder road until you sort of accept that. That's when you can start living. And also, I'd say pack a bag early. That's what I would say to my previous self. Babies can come at any time. Pack a bag early. I think they're probably the main things.
Yeah, you've raised an interesting point. There is some loss when you have a child, and it can feel a little bit unnerving and unsettling. But also just kind of naming that some things are different now, and it's okay, or we might need to grieve through that for a little bit, but then not constantly looking behind and back. Moving forward.
Look at what you've gained and how, the person you were before isn't gone, they're still there, and the life you had before isn't gone, it's still there, but it's just got to zhuzh up and change a little bit. And you'll go forward, and there's so much more to be enjoyed and experienced in a different way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I call, there are, as you're probably aware, definite brain changes when we have a child, and not just, structurally, but in our function and the way we think and our perspective on things. And I think it's played down a lot as something like we've been downgraded. It's not that footloose and fancy-free life we had before, but in so many ways, and you realise that over time, it's an upgrade. The experiences that you are yet to have might not be right now, because this might be the trenches and feel like you're just surviving, but it will come, and you'll be so enriched in your own life and your family life.
That's encouraging for me to hear as well at the moment with the 18-month-old that's not really sleeping. It's just always changing, isn't it? As you've already seen with your little boy, it's a very different stage already to when he was a baby, and it will do it again and again and again. Nothing's ever static. Truly, it's like upgrading for eternity. Everything's
it
always,
really is. I think it's a really beautiful opportunity as a woman to be able to recreate yourself almost. Okay, so what would you like to say to a mother today that might be struggling with some circumstances in her pregnancy or birth, not the way she had planned, or feeling like she missed what she had dreamt of as being those early days and weeks?
I guess it would be to echo again that sort of leaning into this, accepting or realising, taking stock of where you're at, and trying to accept the way, like, things that are happening at the moment, and to go with it and be flexible as best you can, which is really hard if that's not in your nature. And that's what I find is the most helpful for me, is like, what can I change, or what can I do to make this easier on me? whether that's getting in support from your family or paid support or dropping back at work and things, whatever you need to do. It's your rest and your sanity are also really important, and sometimes it's just you can't change what phase you're in at the moment. Like, it's something that might just have to happen, like whether it's developmental or whatever. But what can you do to make yourself as supported and as rested as you can be to able to cope and galvanize yourself for the changes that are coming? I think that's probably the main thing that I found helpful. And sometimes that doesn't help at all. You're still just like, when will this end? But hopefully gives you the strength to meet the challenges that are asked of you in that phase.
Yeah. It's so important. It's not it sounds like a cliche, but we really do have to fill our cup. Those cliches are there because they are true. You know, we are unable to, never before have we had so many responsibilities on us as women and partners and mothers and employees and running businesses and whatever. Yeah. So unless we are putting into ourselves, it's going to be really hard to look after other people as well. Yeah. And I like how you said, it's maybe you've got to see it through, but I think knowing that it will pass and things will change, even though it doesn't seem like it at the time.
Just trying to remember. And I think also the other thing is, like, nothing about babies is like linear or straightforward. Like, something will be going really quote unquote well, like sleep or something, and then something else will happen and it will get changed up again. And that's just the way it goes. So try not to hang on to the bad times for too long, because they'll pass. And
maybe not hanging on to all what the charts and the schedules and Dr. Google says. And
I think that's what I found really helpful too. Like, I didn't use the wonder weeks or anything like that, probably because my son was little, so it didn't really work for him. But not having that hanging over your head and just sort of going into it and experiencing things with fresh eyes, not worrying and comparing so much, I think is helpful as
That's great advice. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and congratulations on your beautiful news.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to, hearing from you as the weeks go on. Yeah, thank you. And thanks for providing some education for pre-eclampsia. So maybe I could just also just end with some of the signs that someone might have pre-eclampsia. Would be the high blood pressure with or without protein in the urine, changes in vision like blurriness, flashing lights, seeing spots, being sensitive to light, headache that doesn't go away, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, swelling in the hands, legs and face, pain in the upper right belly or shoulder, sudden weight gain and trouble breathing. Now, this does not necessarily mean you have preeclampsia if you have one or any of those symptoms, and some of them sort of coincide with the nature of pregnancy anyway. But I think just to say that, because it's something that a lot of us haven't even heard of before, so just to be aware, if you're in doubt at all, it's always safer to go and see your healthcare provider.
Definitely. I think that was with the swelling, I was like, oh, this is just normal. But I should have probably gone in a bit earlier and had that checked. So if you're not sure, always best to chat with someone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, better for that peace of mind. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that it offered something helpful to your own mothering experience. If it has left you with any insights or questions, please do reach out via my socials at Motherhood with Katura, and so that we can get these conversations out to more mothers, I'd be grateful if you could like, share and review this podcast, and we'll see you next time.